Hey everyone, welcome to part 51 of my Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video, we'll create the UI for our inventory system. So if I open the menu and select back, you can see the UI for the inventory. So you'll learn how to use scroll view and how to combine horizontal and vertical layout groups to create complex UIs like this. Of course, we'll remove the scroll bar in the future videos, and scrolling will be done automatically when the user changes the selected item using the up or down arrow keys, just like how it's done in Pokemon games. But in case your game uses mouse, then you can keep the scroll bar here and add some good image to it and make it look good. But I'll be removing it in the future to match the UI of the Pokemon games. Special thanks to all my Patreons for making the series possible. By becoming a Patreon, you can support me in the making of the series and get access to some cool rewards like the complete project files of the series, which also contains some advanced features that are not covered here. So let's start the video. So let's create the UI for the inventory. So I'll go to my UI canvas prefab, and here I'll add a new empty object called inventory UI. Okay. So next I'll add an image to it. And for the image of it, I'll choose the same image that we use for dialog box. So next, I want the inventory UI to cover the entire screen. So I'll click on this, hold Alt, and choose stretch in both directions. Okay. So now we have the background for the inventory UI. So next, I'll add an image to show the icon of the item. So I'll add an image and I'll just call it item icon. So I'll just place it somewhere over here. So we don't have any sample images of the item that we can use as a placeholder here. So I'll bring in a new sprite sheet that has few items. I got the sprite sheet from OpenGameArt and I'll put the link in the description. So I'll open the items folder and import the sprite sheet here. So next I'll change the settings of this image just like we do for all our images. Okay, so it's going to be multiple. Pixel per unit is going to be 16. Filter mode is going to be point, and we don't need compression. Okay. So next I'll go into the sprite editor and split this into separate sprites. So I'll choose slice, grid by cell size, and I know each sprite here is 16 by 16 pixel. So I'll put that here and click on slice. So let me just apply this. So now we can use an image from this as a placeholder in our item icon. So I'll just drag this icon. Okay. So next, below the icon, I'll add a text for the description of the item. So I'll add a text and I'll call it description. And let me just resize and reposition this. Okay, and I'll change its anchor to the left side of the screen. By the way, we can also do that for the item icon. We can change its anchor to the left so that it will stay on the left side when we scale the screen. So next, I'll change the font of our description text. I'll change it to orange kit. The font size will be 40. And let me just type some sample description in here. Okay, let me just resize this a bit. All right. That looks okay to me. So next, we need to add a list of items on the right side of the screen. So since this list can have a lot of items, we want to be able to scroll the list in case if there are more items than what we can fit on the screen, right? So for that, first we need to add a scroll view. So under UI, you can find a scroll view. All right. So I'll rename this to something like item scroll view. So let's look at how a scroll view works. So if you open this, you can see scroll view has a lot of components inside it. So here you can see it has a viewport. So this is the area that will be shown on the screen. And inside the viewport, we have content. So the content can actually be bigger than the viewport. And only a part of the content will be shown in the viewport, right? In case if the content is bigger than the viewport. So even though the content is this big, only this part of it will be shown on the screen. So if we make the content bigger, then you can see the scroll view becomes smaller and we have more area to scroll. But if we make the content smaller, okay, so if we make the content smaller than the viewport, then we don't have anything to scroll. So this is how a scroll view works. We'll put all our items inside the content, but only some of it will be shown in the viewport. Okay, so next we have the scroll bars. So we have an horizontal scroll bar and a vertical scroll bar. So in our case, we only want the scrolling to happen vertically. So we can just delete the horizontal scroll bar. Okay. So now let's look at some settings of the scroll view. So I'll click on this. And in here we have an image, which is the background of the scroll view. So I actually don't need an image, so I'll just remove that. You can put a good background image here if you have one. So next we have the scroll rect component. So this is where we have all the important settings of the scroll view. So first of all, I'll turn off horizontal since I don't want horizontal scrolling. And then I'll change the movement type from elastic to clamped. So this will make sure the scrolling will be clamped and the user won't be able to scroll beyond the content size. Okay, so that's all the settings that we need to change. So if you go ahead and run the game, then you'll be able to scroll using the scroll bar. But currently nothing happens because we don't have anything in the content. So let's go ahead and add a list of items in the content. So first of all, I'll rename the content to item list so that it's more clear. And under this, I'll add a new empty game object called item UI. Okay, don't worry about its size and position. We'll be setting that by using a vertical layout group. Let's actually add a vertical layout group now. So I'll go to the item list and add a vertical layout group here. Okay, so I want child alignment to be upper center, and then I want the items to take up the entire width of the item list. So I'll turn on child force expand and child control size so that width of the child will be controlled by our vertical layout group. But I don't want that for the height. I don't want it to take up the entire height. Instead, I want to set the height manually. So I'll turn this off. All right. So next, let's go to the item UI. And here you can see that the width of it cannot be changed since we have control child size turned on for width. So we can't change the width, but the height, we can set it manually. So I'll set it to 50. So next, inside the item UI, we need two text, one for the item name and the other for the item count. Okay, so I'll add a text and call it name. Okay, so we have to change the font, and I'll change the font size to 40. And in the placeholder, I'll just write something like item name. So now if I make this a little bigger, you'll be able to see the text. So next I'll duplicate this to create item count. Okay, and in here I'll just give a placeholder text like into 3 or something like that. Okay, so we want this to be aligned next to each other horizontally. So what I'm going to do is I'll use an horizontal layout group on the item UI object. So I'll add horizontal layout group, and I want both the width and height to be controlled by the horizontal layout group. So now if we make the scroll view a little bigger, you can see that it's being shown side by side just like we wanted. So one thing I want to change is in the item count text, I want to change its alignment to right. Okay, so the count will be aligned to the right. So we need some padding for the item UI. Right now it's taking up the entire width of the viewport, right? So to add some padding, we can go to the item list, and in the vertical layout group I'll set the padding left and padding right as 10. Okay, so that looks much better. So now we have the item UI, and it contains the text for item name and item count. So next, one thing you can do is, while using a horizontal layout group or even vertical layout group, you can use a layout element to specify the size that each text should take. Okay, so let's say you want the item name to take up more size and the item count just needs a small size, right? So this will allow us to fit bigger names. So for that, what we can do is we can add a layout element to the name text. Okay, and we can give it a preferred width. And now if we change the preferred width, I guess it'll take a while once we add it. But yeah, now if we change the preferred width, you can see that it changes the width of the name text, and the width that is left will be taken by the item count text. Okay, so in our case, we want the name text to take up more width. So I'll increase this to somewhere around here. We can actually make the scroll view even wider and give some more width to the item name. Okay, so that should be enough. So now if we duplicate the item UI, we can start creating the list of items that we want. Okay, so now if you test the game, the scrolling makes a little more sense since we have items inside the content. All right, so next we want the size of the content to be determined by the number of items it has, right? So right now we are setting the height of the content manually, but we don't want to do that. The height should be set dynamically based on the number of items in the list. So if we have thousands of items, it should be really big. And if we only have a few items, it should be really small. Okay, so to do that, we can use a component called content size fitter. Okay, and then in the vertical fit, I'll choose minimum size. So now you can see the size of the content is set based on the number of items we have. So if we duplicate this and create another item, now the height of the content will change automatically. So let's add a lot more item in this list so that we can test our scrolling properly. So I'll just select everything and duplicate. Okay, so now we have 15 items here, and I want my scroll view to show around 8 items by default. So I'll make the scroll view a little bigger in order to show 8 items. And let me just reposition this to the center. And we can actually set the anchor point for this. I'll set it to the right side of the screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. Wait, right now it's only showing 7 items. So I'll make it a little more bigger. And then I'll reposition this. So let's go ahead and test this. Okay, so by default, we are showing 8 items. And then we can scroll to see the items after that. Okay. In the future, we won't be using the scroll bar. Instead, the scrolling will automatically happen when the user selects the item using up and down arrow key, right? Just like how it's done in Pokemon games. But if your game uses mouse, then you can keep the scroll view here and use that for scrolling. All right, it's up to you. So we're done with the UI for the inventory. So next, we need to open the inventory when the user selects bag from the menu, right? So by default, the inventory UI should be inactive, just like all our UI, and we should open it from the menu. So first, I'll add a script for the inventory UI. So inside scripts, inside UI, I'll create a new script called inventory UI. Okay, and I'll attach it to the inventory UI object. So let me open this up in Visual Studio. So we'll come to the script later. First, let's go to the game controller and write the code to open the inventory UI when the bag is selected from the menu. So for that, first I need a reference to the inventory UI. So I'll create that. Okay. And then I'll add a new state for the bag. Okay. So now when the user selects bag from the menu, first I'll make the inventory UI active. Okay, I'll say inventory UI dot game object dot set active true. And then I'll set the state to game state dot bag. So this is the same thing that we did for the party screen in the previous video. So I'm now going to explain this again. So next, inside our update function, if the state is equal to bag, then we want to give the control to the inventory UI, right? So I'll check if the state is equal to game state dot bag, and then we should call an handle update function just like we do for the party screen. Okay, so here I'll remove all this code and create a public function called handle update. Okay, So the item selection logic will be handled from the handle update function. But that will be done in the next video. But for now, let's just close the inventory UI when the X key is pressed. Okay, so from here, I'll check if the X key is pressed. And if it's pressed, then I'll invoke an action that is passed by the game controller, right? The same thing that we did in the party screen. All right, in party screen, we had both on selected and on back actions. So similarly, here I'll take an on back action as a parameter. Okay, so I need to import the system namespace in order to use action. And now when the X key is pressed, I'll just invoke the on back action. Okay, so let's call the handle update from the game controller. And we need to pass the on back action, right? So let me just copy this from the party screen code and create an on back action here. And in this case, we want to deactivate the inventory UI instead of the party screen, right? So I'll change that. And after that, I'll set the state back to free roam. So now we can just pass the on back action to this function. So let's go to Unity and test this. So first we have to assign the inventory UI to the game controller. Okay, I'll just drag and drop it here. So let's test now. So if I open the menu and select bag, you can see that it opens the inventory UI. Okay, and if I press X, it'll go back. So yeah, that's working correctly. So next, we need to create the actual inventory system and show the data of the inventory system here, right? Instead of just showing placeholder items. So that will be done in the next video. Architecting the inventory system needs a whole video, so I'll keep it for the next video. So I'll stop here. If you think this video is helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. That will really help me out. And you can also support the series in Patreon if you are able to afford it. So I'll see you in the next video.